There are moments in life that seem to defy all logic, events that leave an indelible mark on the soul and make you question everything you thought you knew about the world. This is the story of such an event, a true, terrifying experience that unfolded when I came into possession of a beautiful yet sinister anklet. I wasn't seeking anything out of the ordinary that day. It was just another weekend when my friends and I decided to visit the bustling bazaar in the heart of the old city. The bazaar was alive with the aroma of spices, the clinking of bangles, and the chatter of merchants haggling over prices. It was a sensory overload, and I loved every bit of it. We were wandering through the narrow lanes when I stumbled upon a shop that seemed out of place. Unlike the vibrant storefronts around it, this one was dimly lit and almost hidden between two larger stalls. The air around it felt cooler, and I couldn't help but feel a strange pull toward it. Inside, the shop was cluttered with antiques, each with a layer of dust that hinted at their age. The old man behind the counter barely looked up as I entered, his gaze fixed on an ancient ledger. My eyes roamed the shelves until they fell on a silver anklet, tucked away in a corner. It was exquisite, delicate, with tiny bells that looked as though they had been hand-forged centuries ago. The intricate carvings on it seemed to form a pattern, though I couldn't quite decipher it. It was beautiful, and yet there was something unsettling about it. "What's the story behind this anklet?" I asked the shopkeeper, holding it up. His expression changed instantly. He looked at me as if I'd made a grave mistake by even touching it. "That is not for sale," he said curtly, his voice trembling ever so slightly. "Why not?" I asked, genuinely curious. "It belonged to someone. Someone who is no longer among us," he replied cryptically. "It's cursed. Leave it be." Of course, being the skeptic that I am, I thought he was trying to add a layer of mystique to inflate its price. I insisted on buying it, offering him double the amount it was worth. Reluctantly, and with a warning that still echoes in my mind, he let me take it. When I got home, I placed the anklet on my dresser and forgot about it. That night, however, something strange happened. I was jolted awake by the faint sound of bells tinkling. My room was pitch black, and at first, I thought it was just my imagination. But then I heard it again, soft, rhythmic jingling, as though someone were pacing back and forth. The sound seemed to come from the dresser. My heart raced as I switched on the bedside lamp. The anklet lay exactly where I'd left it, but the air felt heavy, and an uneasy silence enveloped the room. I told myself it was probably just the wind or a trick of the mind and went back to sleep, but the sound returned the next night. This time, it was louder, more deliberate. It wasn't just a faint jingling, it was accompanied by a soft whispering, almost inaudible yet distinctly human. I sat up in bed, clutching the blanket, straining my ears to make out the words. It was a woman's voice, low and urgent, speaking in a language I couldn't understand. By the third night, I was terrified. The whispers grew louder, and the bells jingled incessantly. The anklet no longer felt like a harmless trinket, it felt alive, as though it carried with it the weight of someone else's anguish. Desperate for answers, I decided to research the shop where I'd bought the anklet. But when I returned to the bazaar, the shop was gone. In its place was an empty, boarded-up stall that looked like it hadn't been touched in years. Confused and shaken, I turned to a local historian, an elderly woman named Mrs. Kapoor. When I described the anklet to her, her face paled. "That sounds like the anklet of Riya," she said. "Who's Riya?" I asked. "She was a young woman from a village nearby," Mrs. Kapoor began, her voice tinged with sorrow. "Riya was known for her beauty and her anklet, which she wore everywhere. It was said to have been a gift from her grandmother, passed down through generations. But tragedy struck one fateful night. Riya disappeared during a festival, and all that was found of her was her anklet, lying at the edge of the forest. The villagers believed she was taken by a spirit, or perhaps something worse. Since then, anyone who has come into possession of that anklet has met with misfortune." My blood ran cold. The whispers, the jingling bells, it all made sense now. That night, I decided to get rid of the anklet. I placed it in a box, sealed it tightly, and left it outside. But when I woke up the next morning, the box was back in my room, the anklet neatly placed on my dresser. I tried everything, burning it, burying it, even throwing it into a river. But no matter what I did, it always returned. And with each passing night, the activity grew more intense. The whispers turned into cries, the jingling into an almost deafening cacophony. Shadows began to flicker across my walls, and I often felt the sensation of being watched. The anklet seemed to carry with it an unrelenting presence, one that refused to let me go. One night, as I lay in bed, paralyzed with fear, I saw her. A figure stood at the foot of my bed, her form shrouded in darkness. But I could see the faint outline of the anklet on her ankle, its bell swaying as she moved closer. She didn't speak, but her presence conveyed a deep, unyielding sorrow. I knew in that moment that Ria's spirit was bound to the anklet, trapped in a cycle of torment that had extended far beyond her death. Determined to end this nightmare, I sought out a spiritual guide, a man named Pandit Sharma who was known for his ability to communicate with restless spirits. When I showed him the anklet, his face darkened. "This is no ordinary haunting," he said. "The spirit attached to this anklet is not malevolent, but it is in pain. It seeks release." Pandit Sharma performed a ritual to communicate with Ria's spirit, chanting ancient mantras as the room filled with an eerie energy. Through him, Ria's story came to light. She had been betrayed by someone she trusted, lured into the forest, and left to die. Her soul remained tethered to the anklet, unable to move on because her death had never been avenged. This revelation was both heartbreaking and terrifying. I knew what I had to do, but the path ahead would be fraught with danger. The whispers of the anklet were growing louder, and I knew time was running out. After discovering the truth about Ria's connection to the anklet, I couldn't ignore the eerie sense of urgency surrounding the object. The whispers had become more frequent and more distinct. Instead of incoherent murmurs, I began to hear faint words, pleas for help that chilled me to the bone. Ria's presence, once subtle and almost benign, started becoming more tangible. Objects around the house would move ever so slightly. Doors would creak open without a breeze. But it wasn't just about the supernatural. I was being drawn into a web of secrets, pain, and betrayal that Ria's death had left behind. The night after my visit to Pandit Sharma, I was awakened by the sound of faint anklet chimes. The sound wasn't coming from the drawer where I had locked it, it was coming from outside my room. My heart pounded as I got out of bed and followed the sound, each step I took feeling heavier than the last. The anklet lay on the living room floor, gleaming in the moonlight filtering through the window. As I bent down to pick it up, a cold breeze swept past me, and I heard her voice, clearer than ever before. "Find the truth. Help me." The words were a command, not a request. My body trembled, but something inside me knew this was a turning point. I couldn't run from it anymore. The next morning, I began my search for answers. Ria's tragic death was still a whispered rumor in the town. She had been a young woman full of life, beloved by many, but her end was sudden and shrouded in mystery. All I knew was that she had died in her ancestral home under circumstances no one wanted to discuss. I decided to visit Ria's old house, hoping it might hold some clues. The house stood at the edge of the village, its once vibrant exterior now faded and covered in vines. Stepping inside, I was greeted by an overwhelming silence. Dust coated every surface, and the air was heavy with a sense of abandonment. As I explored the rooms, I came across a collection of Ria's belongings, a trunk filled with clothes, old photographs, and a few personal diaries. Flipping through the pages, I found entries that painted a picture of a young woman torn between duty and desire. One entry stood out. "The anklet was a gift, a symbol of something I can't escape. It feels like a shackle, binding me to a future I never wanted." Her words hinted at a deep unhappiness, but the details were vague. Who had given her the anklet, and why did she feel so trapped by it? The next clue came unexpectedly. As I left Ria's house, an elderly woman from the neighborhood approached me. She introduced herself as Mira, a distant relative of Ria's family. Mira seemed hesitant but eventually opened up when I mentioned the anklet. Ria was a kind soul, but her life was not her own, Mira said, her voice trembling. She was forced into an engagement with a man she didn't love. That anklet, it was his gift, a way to mark her as his property. But Ria didn't want to marry him. She had fallen in love with someone else. Mira's words sent a chill through me. What happened to her? I asked. She tried to break free, but the man she was engaged to, he didn't take it well. There was an argument, a terrible fight. The next day, Ria was found dead. They said it was an accident, but Mira trailed off, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I felt a wave of anger and sorrow wash over me. Ria's death wasn't just a tragedy, it was a crime. And her spirit wouldn't rest until the truth came to light. With a clearer picture of Ria's story, I returned to Pandit Sharma. He listened intently as I recounted everything I had learned. "You must confront the one responsible," he said gravely. "Only then can her soul find peace. But be warned, the anklet holds not just her spirit, but also her pain and anger. It may resist your efforts." Determined to see this through, I tracked down the man Ria had been engaged to, Arjun. He was now a wealthy businessman, living far from the village. When I confronted him about Ria, his reaction was immediate. She was a foolish girl, he sneered. She didn't know her place. Her death was an accident, nothing more. But his words rang hollow. The guilt in his eyes told a different story. That night, I prepared for the ritual Pandit Sharma had instructed me to perform. It involved taking the anklet back to the place where Ria had died and invoking her spirit to confront the truth. As I stood in the darkness of Ria's old house, the anklet in hand, I felt a surge of energy. The whispers grew louder, and shadows seemed to dance on the walls. Ria, I called out, my voice trembling. I know the truth. I know what happened to you. Show yourself. The air grew icy, and suddenly, she appeared, a faint, glowing figure, her eyes filled with both sorrow and anger. You found me, she whispered. Now, let them see. The room filled with an otherworldly light, and I saw a vision unfold, a replay of Ria's final moments. Arjun's face twisted with rage as he argued with her, and then, the fatal shove that sent her tumbling down the stairs. Her scream echoed in the room, and then silence. The vision faded, and Ria's spirit looked at me, her expression softer now. Thank you, she said. But my story isn't over. Promise me. Promise you'll make sure he pays for what he did. I nodded, tears streaming down my face. I promise. With that, her figure dissolved, and the anklet crumbled to dust in my hands. The weight of her presence lifted, and I felt a profound sense of relief. In the days that followed, I reported what I had learned to the authorities. Arjun's past caught up with him, and he was finally held accountable for his crime. Though Ria's story had come to an end, the experience left a lasting impact on me. The anklet had been more than a cursed object, it was a symbol of her pain and a reminder of the injustice she had endured. I realized that sometimes, the things we fear the most aren't just about the supernatural, they're about the truths we're too afraid to confront. And in the end, it's those truths that set us free. The events that followed my confrontation with Ria's story were nothing short of harrowing. Though her spirit had been partially appeased, the energy surrounding the anklet wasn't entirely at rest. There was one final step to take, and I knew deep down that this journey wasn't over. After reporting Arjun to the authorities, I hoped to find closure. But instead of relief, I was haunted by vivid nightmares. Each night, I found myself back in Ria's ancestral home, wandering the dimly lit halls as the faint chime of anklets echoed around me. Her voice, once sorrowful, now carried a sense of urgency. You promised me justice, but it's not complete. There's more to be done. One night, the dream took a darker turn. I saw Ria standing at the edge of the staircase where she had met her tragic end. Her form flickered between her human self and something darker, more vengeful. The whispers grew louder, almost deafening. I woke up drenched in sweat, clutching my chest as if her spirit had reached through the dream and gripped my heart. Desperate for answers, I revisited Pandit Sharma. His calm demeanor was replaced with a grave seriousness when I described my dreams. She is still bound by the pain of betrayal, he said. While Arjun has faced justice in the mortal world, the spiritual bonds of her anguish remain. There is a ritual, one that can sever these ties and allow her soul to transcend. But it is not without danger. The ritual required returning to the very place where Ria had died and performing a rite of release. It involved invoking the spirit one final time, acknowledging her pain, and destroying the anklet's remnants. But Pandit Sharma warned me. If there is any unresolved emotion, anger, fear, or doubt, her spirit may resist and turn on you. You must approach her with a clear heart and pure intent. Armed with the ritual instructions and a resolve to see this through, I returned to Ria's ancestral home. The house, once a haunting relic of the past, now felt even heavier with energy. The air was thick, the silence oppressive, and every creak of the wooden floor sent a chill down my spine. I set up the ritual items, incense, sacred water, and the anklet's remnants, which I had kept carefully wrapped since the night it had crumbled. As I began the incantations, the atmosphere shifted. The temperature plummeted, and a cold wind swept through the room. The whispers began again, faint at first but growing louder with each passing moment. Shadows danced on the walls, and the faint glow of Ria's spirit began to take shape before me. Ria appeared, her expression a mix of sorrow and rage. Her form flickered, as if caught between two states of being. "Why have you brought me here again?" she demanded, her voice echoing unnaturally. "I promised to help you," I said, my voice trembling but firm. But your pain runs deeper than I realized. I'm here to set you free." Her laughter was bitter, filled with anguish. "Free? You think it's that simple? My pain isn't just mine, it's tied to this place, to the betrayal, to the life I lost." The room shook violently, and I struggled to remain steady. I realized that she wasn't just bound to the anklet, she was tied to the very emotions that had consumed her in life: betrayal, heartbreak, and despair. "Ria," I said, tears streaming down my face. "I know you've suffered, but holding on to this pain will only keep you trapped. Let me help you let go." As I continued the ritual, the whispers grew deafening. The shadows in the room seemed to take on forms, representing the people who had wronged Ria, Arjun, her family, even herself. Each shadow lunged toward her, and she recoiled in fear and anger. I realized that the final step wasn't just about performing the ritual, it was about helping her confront these shadows. "Ria, you are stronger than this," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos around me. "You don't need to be defined by their actions. You are more than their betrayal." She turned to face the shadows, her form glowing brighter. One by one, the shadows dissipated, their energy dissolving into the air. Finally, only one shadow remained, a dark, twisted version of herself. It represented her own guilt and self-blame. She hesitated, but I stepped forward and reached out to her. "You deserve peace," I whispered. "Forgive yourself." With those words, she reached out and touched the shadow. There was a blinding light, and the house shook as if it were being torn apart. When the light faded, Ria's spirit stood before me, serene and radiant. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft and full of gratitude. "You've given me what I couldn't find on my own." As her form began to fade, she looked at me one last time. "Live your life fully. Don't let fear hold you back the way it held me." And with that, she was gone. The anklet's remnants turned to ash, and the oppressive energy in the house lifted. In the weeks that followed, I felt a profound sense of relief. The nightmares stopped, and the whispers were gone. Ria's story had come to an end, but it left me with a deeper understanding of the weight of unresolved emotions and the importance of letting go. Though I'll never forget the horrors I faced during this journey, I'm grateful for the lessons it taught me. The Whispering Anklet was more than just a cursed object, it was a symbol of a life cut short, a story that needed to be heard, and a soul that deserved peace. And as for me, I've learned to listen to the whispers of my own heart, to face my fears, and to embrace the unknown with courage. Thank you for joining me on this terrifying journey. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and share. Stay tuned for more spine-chilling tales of the paranormal.